Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Pump It Up, a Kentucky baseball podcast. Adam Luckett here with you, as always, joined by Fat Cat Central's Derek Terry. And Kentucky had a short run in Hoover, and now we're playing the waiting game. Playing the waiting game, doing some scoreboard watching as Kentucky waits. It's going to feel like, I think, a pretty long wait over there at the baseball facility until Selection Monday. And we're going to see where Kentucky is, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what went down there at the Hoover Met with Kentucky and Vanderbilt, what has gone on other places around the country, and where Kentucky is from a resume standpoint and who kind of need to watch here. Derek, I think we got to jump in, really start us off here. Let's just rewind the clock. Clay Matthews goes crazy. Kentucky, Arkansas. They lose a thriller, right? Saturday afternoon. Well, honestly, one of the more crazier games I remember seeing. It just totally dead in the water. Then I was like, are they really going to win this daggum baseball game? And then just couldn't finish it off. But to set it up to where Jackson Jelkin could pitch in Hoover, and I felt good. If I was going to put my handicapping on, I probably would have had Kentucky as a favorite in that game. But they couldn't get it done, kind of imploded on them there in the sixth inning, and they end up losing. And so they did the thing that you really felt like they couldn't do, right? They got the 13th win. It's like, okay, just don't lose don't lose all of these next three. You go 1-2 over the next three, you're in really good shape. And I think it was only the second time all year they've lost three in a row, SEC games. So tough spot to be in, not where they wanted to be, I think, leaving Hoover.
Yeah, that 13-win mark's been tough on them the last 2 years. Same thing happened last year. They swept Oklahoma the week before the regular season was over and then lost four in a row at that point as well after getting swept by Vanderbilt and then losing to Oklahoma at the beginning of the SEC tournament. But, yeah, man, Clay Matthews, he's not slowed down. Zach Stewart, he was hitting nukes yesterday against Tennessee. They've not played today yet, have they? I don't think, or maybe they have.
They have the day off. They play tomorrow. They're 2-2 here in the quarterfinals.
Okay.
Yeah, play tomorrow.
Good deal. Well, he's been scorching hot. I mean, he crushed them all weekend. An impressive run. Yeah, going back to that Saturday game, that was a first inning. I was trying to rack my brain, and I was like, there's been so much Kentucky baseball that I'm sure they've had a start similar as poorly as this one, but I couldn't remember it. I mean, to go down 10-0 before you even taking that bat is so rare that they would fall into a hole like that. I mean, lucky they more or less. I'm going to say they kind of conceded that game at some point whenever you're using Will Coleman and Bryson Trickle, these guys who hadn't really pitched in SEC games and came in and, kind of got them to a point where it didn't get any more out of hand, basically. I mean, the damage was done early. And then Kentucky has that 9-run fifth inning where Carson Hansen hits a grand slam and they just keep kind of fighting back. And, I mean, you get to that point, it's like a brand new ball game and you still have 4 innings to play. And by that point, Jack Bennett was on the mound. So, I mean, they were using one of their key arms. And you mentioned Jelkin starting Tuesday. I mean, he was up stretching around, soft tossing a little bit. I mean, I think there was a chance if they had the lead in that game, he was going to come in and try to close it out again, similar to what he had done on Thursday. So, tough, with Friday night, just the Van Cleve injury, it's really terrible injury you almost never see play out that way on a baseball field. Kentucky came up short that night, and then Saturday, like you mentioned, kind of the same. I ended up pulling the numbers. I wrote a story on it earlier in the week. Just 55% of their runs in conference play that they allowed came on the final days of the series. Just absurd. 102 runs is what they gave up by the end of the season. So essentially 10 runs a game in the series finales. And it's really difficult because they had so many good offensive games as well. That was a good offensive game against Arkansas. Sure. They put up 12 runs. They scored 9 against Tennessee. They scored 9 against Ole Miss. They scored 10 at LSU. And, it wasn't in a series finale, but they had a 9-run game against South Carolina and a loss. They had so many games where, if you kind of look at it from an offensive standpoint, they should have won games this season. Louisville, in a midweek, scored 10 and lost. So that series over the weekend was just a lot of kind of what Kentucky baseball's been. And I know you wrote a story on Tuesday with how the Vanderbilt game played out. Like, I just feel like these last few games, the trend lines that they've had all season have really shown up. And it is what we've said it for a few weeks now. Like, it is what this team is at this point.
Yeah, I just thought that the game against Vanderbilt was just a perfect 9 inning encapsulation of what this baseball team is. Like when Jelky's rolling, they are like I think they play like a top 15 team. I really do. And I think that's shown up with some of the teams they beat throughout the year. And, a lot of those wins are away from home, where they get the pitching and you see the glimpses on offense, what they can do. Like you saw with Tyler Bell, just kind of the easy power. And then you saw, Luke Lawrence just grinding at bat, hit an oppo double to get you a run. You saw you've seen players kind of emerge throughout the season, whether it's a Braxton Van Cleve, an Ethan Hindle, a Carson Hansen gets on that home run where you just feel like, okay, all right, this is a good baseball team right now. They're playing good ball. And then all of a sudden you just out of nowhere, an implosion can happen. And it is pitching. Pitching has a lot to do with it. The bullpen has a lot to do with it. But there's also, I feel like with this team, the lack of creating the big play, creating the winning play that can either stop the bleeding or flip a game, right? You just can't get one of these grounders. You can't get out into these outs. You get Caden Cloud had been playing great defense at third base, I thought, really for the last 6, 7, 8, 9 ball games. He makes an error when you couldn't have it, and it's one where the first baseman, had a chance at least to get it, but, it would have been a really tough play, and you just can't stop the bleeding. And then, when you get the bullpen that stops it, like Jack Sams comes out, posts to 0 the next inning, it's a tie game. You got the meat of the order coming up. I mean, it might have been Vandy's easiest inning of the game, 1, 2, 3, quick. And it's just it feels like just like a lack of complimentary baseball, specifically late in games that they've been able to play. And I think even the Arkansas game on Saturday kind of played out like that. You scratch and claw all the way back to make it a fresh game. You get into the late innings and you can't, get it done, get over the hump. And that's just, I think that's played out. I think a lot of it has played out on Sundays this year, this season, but we've seen it, a lot. It's just a frustrating hill that they've been trying to climb and they just haven't been able to, I think, get over it all year.
Yeah, I mean, they just got mowed down by that reliever from Vanderbilt. Kranzler came in, and he dominated him for those first 3 innings. They finally got to him a little bit in the 9th, but Vanderbilt had already tacked on the insurance there in the 8th with the home run from Johnston, and then the error before that from Owen Jenkins, trying to make a play down at third, where there was really, at least from my opinion, there was really no play to be had there, and tried to make an off-balance throw. And I think you got to give credit to Tyler Bell. He made a great effort to try to do everything he could, but just not able to throw him out. And, it's a 1-run game going to that all happened in the 8th, right? I do believe that all happened in the 8th inning, or one of those runs might have been earlier, but I know the 2-run home run put him up. They took the
5-4 lead in the 6th, and then they didn't score in the 7th. And then because Kentucky had one swing at the plate down 5-4. They go to the top of the 7th. They're down 5-4. That's when they had the meat of the order up. They go 1, 2, 3, and then the bottom of the I guess they got 2. I think it all came in 8th. Maybe they got 1 in the 7th to go up 6-4, and then got 2 in the 8th. It was something along those lines. But they were in the game there for a couple of bats.
I didn't have the box score pulled up. I was going off memory, and I pulled up my game story from the other day. But the tough thing, too, with the inning where it really kind of turned into a disaster for Kentucky, it's one of the worst baseball, if you're playing or watching, just ground balls that are just finding holes. These balls weren't scorched. They're just hit where they're not, and they're fine. I don't want to call them bleeders, but they're when you're watching, I know you were there, but me watching on TV, when they're put in play, my initial instinct is it's going to be an out. It's not like it's a rocket shot, but it's just, you see it on TV where the, lineman is on defense and they're just getting through. So the worst part about that, though, at 2 outs, and it's a 2-out walk that started it. And, he was really rolling up until that point, but the bleeders start. Well, I just said I wasn't going to call them bleeders, but, they started going through, and all of a sudden, you're kind of on your heels. And you mentioned, Sams comes in, he gets a ground ball. And, you got to get out of that inning right there, have a brand new game. And as it was a throwing error. And Poor Cloud too, man. Here lately, I mean, he's still able to hit for some extra bases. Like you saw that during the Arkansas rally, but he's running a extremely high K rate right now. He ended up with 40% in the SEC, and he was really in there to play defense. I think at a point, like you mentioned, he had done very well. He's extremely athletic, gave them another really good option. But when you're striking out 40% of the times, and if you're in there to play defense, like you got to make that throw out there in that situation, and. Yeah. So,
and on our board, at least, there's been a lot of like, why is Will Marcy playing over Scott Campbell? And my rebuttal to that has just been K rate, and there's been some defensive misuse. You can have one, but you can't have two, right? Like, and right. So
I agree.
That's where they're kind of at. It was a tough spot for Cloud because I think he has been playing good baseball. And he's done some good things. He's come up with some big hits. Like you've mentioned, like that's the thing with him. Like you can live with the Ks a little bit because when he is hitting, he's hitting for power. You're getting some.
He's kind of like Hendel in that regard earlier in Hendel's career. Like he didn't get a ton of hits, but when he did get hits, they were extra base hits. And Caden's not allergic to taking a walk either. I mean, I think his walk rate is in the double digits. So he's just swinging and missing a lot right now. So. It was a tough spot there. Adcock came in, and really the only damage I feel like that happened to him was the home run, unfortunately for him. It was a 2-run shot there from Johnston that, he hurt
top of the Vandy lineup's going to get you. They're going to get just about everybody, in my opinion. The top of the lineup is going to get you eventually. It was just a game where you felt like Kentucky, specifically once they ran off Fennell, that they should have scored some runs in that game, and they just couldn't do it. I mentioned on the rep reaction, Hendel, Tarnish, and Hudson Brown combined 0 for 12. That's not a winning recipe typically for Kentucky. But back to Jelkin, I left the fifth saying, okay, he's at like 70-plus pitches here. Can you get through 7? And can you add like another run? Could you be up, 5-1 or 6-1? After 7, if they would have got there, I thought that was Kentucky's game. It felt like it was like they had Vanderbilt on the ropes. It was just a couple more body blows might have just made them fall to the canvas. And then it just got flipped on them in the late innings again. And we've seen this, and like you just knew, like as soon as they tied that game in the 6th, you're like everyone knew watching it. I think Nick Grouse said I have deja vu every time I watch Kentucky baseball this year, and I think that's valid because we've seen that the same song and dance, the same movie keeps playing.
I know Roush spent a lot of time at the track there in December and April and early May. He probably got around to seeing some ball here recently. I did have a note here. I wanted to kind of give a shout out to Carson Hansen. This is a warm weather hitter here, isn't it? Like, this is a kid from Wisconsin. Last year's the same deal. Like when the calendar turns to May, he starts hitting. So he hit the grand slam opposite field against Arkansas. It was a big swing there. And then, he went oppo the other day. It seemed like to me, and I've watched a little bit of the SEC.
Both of them went oppo. Ball's flying out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like typically in the past, that was like, teams go to Hoover and there's no home runs that get hit and all this and that. Like those balls are being blasted out of there this week so far in the games that I've watched. So, but no, Hansen, I mean, he stepped in here for Ben Cleve, who, had that injury last weekend, and he's providing some pop. And he kind of did the same thing last year whenever he got put in the lineup. It was a little bit earlier in the year last year when he got in there. But to come off the bench, I'm sure he's, I think, Mingione talked last week about having some of the seniors, and that's been a group this year that's like it's been interesting. Campbell, you mentioned him earlier, he's been in and out. Cerny's really not played at all here lately. Hansen was in that group that was in and out as well, and to be able to come in there in a spot like that and really put some big swings for this team, I think has been good. And if they're going to continue to play baseball, I think he'll be somebody who's going to be in the lineup back in the regional. So encouraging signs there from him, but. This is I know we're going to get to it with the bracketology and things like that, but I did want to make a note that Carson Hansen's been I think it's something about the warm weather. Like once you get this kid heated up, he likes playing when it's hot outside.
Yeah, that was he made them really these last 2 games not really miss Van Cleve because you got the power, the big grand slam, his second grand slam of the season. It's really kind of, if you would have bet, all right, who has the grand slams in SEC play? I'm not sure a lot of people are betting Carson Hansen and Scott Campbell, but those are the ones that had it this year, and he's really
Yeah,
stepped up
Scott.
for him. And you're right. You're right. I think they're going to need him here if they get in the regional. And I think that's a good pivot point. Hoover, the one thing I'll say, like it's pretty cool. I think the setup down there is really cool. Very much, it feels like a big event going to it to me, and that's pretty cool for a baseball event. It wasn't like the best crowd when I was there, but I saw Auburn when they were playing
Oh my
LSU. The
God,
place was
the
absolutely
LSU
packed.
fans.
Yeah,
Yeah. And a
and
lost
then
season. Did you mention, you might have mentioned on the pod, we might have talked about it in person, I can't remember, but it did very much have Kentucky basketball SEC tournament vibes for LSU. Like even in a year where they know their season's going to end as soon as they lose down there, it's still packed out, which is, I think a great sign for their fan base to still kind of stick with those guys during a tough season.
And just like parking's free. It's a huge parking lot. Like you can get there, tailgate, just hang out. It really is a cool event. They've got the fan center for stuff to do with kids. They got the 2 berms. So like if it's not that packed, you can have your kids out there running around. It really is. And there were younger kids running around with their gloves and stuff. It really was a cool event. And if you're ever considering going, like, and specifically if Kentucky ever got, was good where you felt like they were going to win a couple games here, especially in the single elimination format, it'd be a fun 2-3 day trip. That would be my takeaway. I mean, even though I was only there for a day, I was really impressed just with the whole setup and the event, and it was pretty cool. But I do want to now we gotta put our bracket hats on. But first, we do need to shout out to our guy Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise. We're thrilled to have Andy sponsoring our baseball coverage this spring. He's a big baseball fan, and from his line of work, he has seen firsthand the fantastic traits that baseball players bring to the franchise world. Are you sick of your job, ready to leave the corporate rat race, want to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Have a job and want a side hustle? Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, passions, and financial requirements. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. Head to myperfectfranchise.net to learn more, or you can text or call Andy at 404-973-9901. And Derek, we talked about it a little bit coming on here before we press the go live button. It was interesting, just like the twists and turns for Kentucky from losing on Tuesday until Wednesday. It felt like the take was, oh, Kentucky's out of the tournament. And then the next day they're back, they're like, oh, they're in, and they might be in pretty safe right now. So basically they're on the bubble with a handful of teams here, couple power conference teams, but I feel like the power conference teams, which would be Michigan and NC State, they're above. And then they're kind of battling, I think, some Sun Belt teams when you look at Troy, Texas State, and Louisiana. Louisiana might be above them now, but they're right there. And I feel like they've got a little bit of a buffer here when you pull up the resumes.
Yeah, and UK's these overall numbers could still end up shifting a little bit. Like Arkansas yesterday moved back into the quad one there. You have that. Yeah, you have that pulled up here. So yeah, they're back in a quad one. Last time I wrote a story, they were not. They were still sitting with 6 quad one wins. So I think for Kentucky, and I wrote the story yesterday, and I really do think if Kentucky does get in the tournament, it's really as simple as these metrics are just pretty strong compared to all the other bubble teams. 14 wins overall in quad one and quad two, 7 quad one wins. I believe that is more than any of these other teams that are on the bubble, at least from the power conferences. So metrically, this is strong. Mark Etheridge at d1baseball.com. Mark does a great job. Made the point that the last 2 teams that have had 13 wins from the SEC in the regular season, that would have been last year's Kentucky team and then Florida in 2024. These teams got in and they weren't even among the last 4 to make it in. So maybe not comfortably in, but they really, if you would have seen it beforehand, you wouldn't have been sweating because they had done enough to. I don't know if you want to consider them still a bubble team last year or not, but you get the point I'm trying to make. They were in without having to sweat it too much in reality. Whereas last year, kind of the same bracketology had them either as last 4 in or last 4 out. So that's the good, I think, for Kentucky. They're top, within the top 40 and all the metrics that are going to be taken into account: KPI, DSR, RPI. To me, if they do get left out, the reason I think the committee will give when asked about it is the overall one, that they only won 2 SEC series, and 2, and Mark had this as well. I want to credit D1 because I couldn't find the stat anywhere else. I don't know if they were using some formula or if I just didn't know how to access it. But Kentucky ended up playing the softest SEC schedule, I guess, for lack of a better term. It was 16th in strength of schedule. And they went 4-9 against the other 4 teams that were down there with them. And they finished 13th in their league. So, like, my whole point of the column is I feel like optically, in the micro view, it is not very good. Like, you could definitely find some things to ding Kentucky there. Whereas when you kind of zone out, though, and you look at the big picture, their metrics are probably still going to be better than these teams that are going to be on the bubble with them.
Yeah, I have it pulled up. I wrote an article today. Go to KentuckySportsRadio.com where I kind of just do the bubble comp here, and it's really kind of glaring when you just kind of start breaking it down. Kentucky's RPI was 37. I think it's 36 right now. They're below. The only one they're below is, or it looks like they're still 37. The only one they're below is Louisiana at 36. So they got a better RPI than everyone else. Their DSR, Derek and Nick Mingione mentioned this in his post-game press conference. It's just like, I guess it's like baseball's version of KenPom. It's just kind of adjusted efficiency. It's kind of how I understand it. Kentucky's is 30, Louisiana 47, Texas State 53, Troy 60, East Carolina 35, NC State 36, Michigan 68. Mm-hmm. So that's that's better than everyone else. Their non-conference RPI is 14. That's clearly better than everyone else. I think it's 14 spots better than the next closest team, which is Texas State at 28. Strength of schedule is 29. There's a few teams with like a top 35 strength of schedule, most notably Troy at 10, which might be their kind of meal ticket to get in, but strength of schedule is right there. And then quad 1, they're 7-8 in quad 1. Troy 7-9, so they're right there with them. So Troy feels like a safe team, but everyone else is kind of like down. It's about 4-10 Michigan, 5-11 NC State, East Carolina just 3-6. As it seems like the American was pretty soft this year. Texas State 2-9, Louisiana 5-8, got better quad 1 wins, and then like the Citadel today bumped up to quad 2. So like all of a sudden they've got a 7-5 quad 2 record. Which is better than everyone else. And then they're if you combine quad 3 and quad 4, which is what I did, they're kind of all similar. They all got 7, 8, 9 losses, 15 to 20 wins. There's not one that just kind of mowed through all these quad 3 and quad 4 teams. So when you're comparing them to this group of teams, I just find it hard to imagine or envision that they're not getting in as opposed to some of these other teams. Specifically, I look at Michigan and NC State. I think it's pretty clear that Kentucky's got the better resume. So I would be surprised if
Michigan
if it
was
came
the one
down
I couldn't really figure out as to why. What's the case for Michigan? Their RPI's in the 50s. I know they've played well recently, but that was the one team that I think they were in over Kentucky in one of these bracketology things. But I just wasn't really.
To me, I wonder if it's. I don't get it. Yeah, I guess maybe they got hot late. I think that's fair. They lost the series to Nebraska. They got swept by UCLA. I don't know that they took the series against Oregon in April. That was at home. Maybe they split with Oregon State. Yeah, I don't know. I think you just lost. You just kind of 29 quad 3 and quad 4, 7 quad 3 losses, 9-4 quad 2. Yeah, that one was a little head scratching. Maybe they got higher. Maybe they were higher in the RPI. Maybe a couple losses late really tanked them. But yeah, I didn't really understand that.
Well, if you're looking around, like I use Baseball America and I use D1. It's nothing against anyone else who does bracketology. It's just these are the two. I subscribe to these places. I tend to want to use the people that I'm, paying to read. Baseball America, Jacob Brunner, he does a great job. He used to be a beat writer at 24/7 covering Florida. He's got the Wildcats all over the place last few days, in and out. Maybe that's just how it's going to be. But he kind of made the point. I think it might be behind a paywall, so I don't want to spoil it. But basically made the point that what we were just saying, when you stack Kentucky up against a lot of these other bubble teams, like it's just hard to see UK being left out. So you've really got to hope that this next few days, just nothing crazy happens and a lot of these spots get kind of taken up by bid stealers. Because if the bubble, if it stays in a way where, you know, a lot of these teams that we're talking about are the teams that actually have a chance to get in, I tend to agree that they're going to get in as well. I mean, it would be hard for me to see them not getting in. And the one question I did have, maybe you know better than me, for the committee, and I know it helps because Kentucky's an SEC program, they're going to have the chance to play a lot of teams that have high RPIs. When they do start digging into these wins as well, one of the things I was thinking about, and I went and looked at, I think it might have been Texas State. I just looked at, it was one of the Sun Belt teams. It was either Texas State or Louisiana. I think it was Texas State. But either way, so many of Kentucky's quad one wins are against teams in the top 15. Whereas some of these other programs have wins that are still quad one, but they might be, you know, on the low end of a quad one. I assume that does get taken into account. Do you know?
I don't per se. Little new to baseball. I just like, what is the line of like demarcation? When are we separating tiers? Because like, yeah, if you're gonna like for Kentucky, you see all these top 15 wins, and then Texas State is 1-6 against the top 15. And their one win was a home win, a one-run win against A&M, but they lost 2 to Texas. They got swept by Southern Miss, and then they played a 26 Coastal Carolina on the road, and lost 2-3. So like, yeah, I just think you kind of look at it, you know, all you can really do is kind of comp them and like to these other teams. Like Troy split with Alabama, Kentucky swept Alabama. It's just I just have a hard time seeing like all of these teams getting over them. I think one, you can make the case, but like it's a large volume of teams, I think, that would have to get over them. Now we're talking about like 4, 5, 6, but I'm to the point now where I think like when that last 4 in graphic pops up, I think there's might be more likely that Kentucky's not in that than they would be. That I think it's more likely that they're not in the last 4 than it is that they're out of the tournament. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I feel like that's more likely now, just how this weekend has shaken out. And I've talked about it the last couple of weeks. I feel like it's just, though, when you have wins like Kentucky has, those are when you start comparing bubble teams with flawed resumes. To me, those are like just what they're gold, because that's the ultimate separator at the end of the day. To me, it's who you beat. And Kentucky has beat teams, and they've got like good marks and everywhere else. It's not like they've got a bad RPI score or they got a bad DSR score or KPI. Every single thing that they use, they have a mark that says that they're a tournament team. Now, I think you can, like, if you wanted to, you can, all right, let's get under the hood and see and nitpick the resume, because there is plenty of 2-8 in SEC series, right? They lost series to South Carolina, Missouri. They were 1-3 against Vanderbilt. Like, there's plenty to nitpick at, but I think ultimately what's going to get them in was not getting swept in the SEC. Like, ultimately, I think that's really their meal ticket at the end of the day. They got the sweep against Alabama. We didn't know it at the time, but that was just like the biggest weekend of the season, really. And then they did just enough to kind of sneak, I think, on through here.
I also think optically that if that Alabama series had happened a little bit more recently, like I feel like people would talk about it a little differently. It's easy whenever it was 2 months ago to kind of, because like you were saying, I mean, at the time, Alabama, I mean, you know, it's a good way to start SEC play, right? You're 3-0. I mean, you couldn't have started any better. But in terms of what that win was going to be for them, I mean, this is clearly the high mark for their resume. What's carrying them? I wanted to go back to Louisiana as one of these teams. And I think the Sun Belt, it's pretty impressive how many teams they have here that are kind of vying for these bids. But they currently have the same number of quad one wins as Kentucky. They both have 7. They're 7-9. They won a series at home against Southern Miss, which is a big series win for Louisiana, because Southern Miss is going to be a regional host. I think they're projected like in that 10 to 12 range right now. But here are the other teams they played outside of Southern Miss that all qualified as RPI quad ones. Played Missouri State, Coastal Carolina, Troy, Texas State, and Arkansas State. And I want to say outside of Arkansas State, all those teams have a chance to make the tournament, or probably projected in or not, or close to it, like in Texas State's Texas State's case, I mean. So I'm not saying these are bad opponents or that they, beat up on bad teams or anything like that. These are all quad ones. That's the reason I asked you earlier if you knew kind of the difference in how they're going to evaluate these, because it is different than playing Alabama. It's different than, having a road win at Auburn, a road win against, Ole Miss, some of these other teams that they've defeated, win against Arkansas now, which is a quad one. So some of these other teams in the South, like they do play teams like Georgia and Alabama. I think it was Troy who I was looking at that played both those teams. And, that helps, if you're able to win some of those midweeks. So that is interesting because Louisiana is a team that's currently like ranked above one spot above Kentucky in the RPI. So, but it is kind of Kentucky and then all these Sun Belt teams right now in the RPI that are all around them. And that tournament is still ongoing. I haven't seen any of the results today. I haven't had a chance to look at it really, but I know Adam Revlett wrote a column at Backcat Central kind of looking at some of these. And yeah, I mean, in Troy's case, that's who I was looking at earlier. They played 2 games against Alabama and 2 games against Georgia. In addition
and
to
3 games above 500. Troy's 3 games above 500.
Like, 30 and 27. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that gives you, to me, that's a little indication of the bubble, like just where that bubble kind of is.
Yeah. Like their case to me, just looking at it real quick, 6 quad 1 wins is good. And then they have the number 2 in the non-conference, the number 2 strength of schedule in the country and number 10. So yes, 3 games above 500, but obviously their argument would be they're playing, a schedule that for a Sun Belt team, this is kind of unbelievable, I think, to have a strength of schedule that's top 10 in the country. So that's an interesting one. They do have a Louisville alum who coaches that team, Skylar Meade, down at Troy. So I don't know. I'm pretty fascinated. I mean, I know Kentucky would like to have been in a spot where you're not having to have this, by the time they lost to Vanderbilt, it's really a 6-day wait, 5-6 day wait in between.
Yeah.
Waiting to see kind of what happens and people being on pins and needles, seeing what ends up happening with this team. So I'm with you though. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked either way. And whenever you put yourself on the bubble, I've always said this, no matter the sport, like if you put your resume in the hands of the committee, like you just got to deal with whatever happens. And I'm not going to say they got screwed if they don't get in. But I do think whenever you look at this, they've got, I'll put it this way, you would want to have Kentucky's resume compared to a lot of these other teams that are on the bubble. So if you want to take any kind of solace,
that's where I'm at.
What it is going into Monday.
Yeah. And I would say, we'll say Louisiana and Texas State are playing tonight in the Sun Belt tournament. I would say, Louisiana's probably in regardless. I would say Kentucky wants to stay on top of Texas State, which I think they are right now. So I would say
1 spot, I think.
Yeah.
Or 2 spots because Troy's after them.
I would say cheer for the Cajuns there, because I think even if that happened, I think they'd be fine. I know SoCon, like Mercer lost today. Mercer's going to be an at-large team if they don't get a bid. So that's a potential bid stealer. I would watch the American Conference because it's really just UTSA and East Carolina. If someone came from the pile there to win, that could be a bid stealer. But I think I want to be careful how I say this, but I do think there's going to have to be some legitimate kind of chaos this weekend for Kentucky to be left out here. It's just shaping up that way.
Yeah, if you use D1's last 4 in, Kentucky's in it as well, just like they are at Baseball America. They're joined by ECU, NC State, and Michigan. So we just talked about NC State and Michigan. I was with you. Like, I'm not sure if you're just playing the metrics game, which I think if you're in Kentucky's shoes, that's what you want. You want the committee to really lean on these metrics because that's where you have your strongest argument, which is always funny too, just as an aside, like, because I know you were in those press conferences the other day. You had Mingione really going metric heavily, talking about KPI, DSR, and all this. And then you get Tim Corbin coming in there. And what's his argument?
Yeah.
Hey, RPI is not everything. I mean, it can't be the only thing we're looking at here. Yeah, and why is that? Because their RPIs in the 70s or whatever it was. And that's why that shouldn't matter. You should look at, we beat so-and-so teams or whatever. So it's just all the politicking that goes in this time of year, all the campaigns. That's what you're supposed to do, though, as a coach. I mean, you take it for what it is. But if you're in their shoes, that's what you'd expect them to do. So I don't know. That last 4 in, I mean, it's kind of playing towards the bigger programs there. ECU is one that's 1 spot ahead of Kentucky. In the RPI, ECU is 44th, so quite a bit lower, about 7 spots lower than Kentucky.
And they've got a 3-7 quad 1 record and 3-4 in quad 2. So, like, we'll see what happens over there in that tournament. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, and then like just looking at some of their other metrics here, I'll pull them up right quick. RPI 45, DSR is 35, so that they've got a good DSR score, but Kentucky's 30. Non-con RPI 54, strength of schedule 45, and then 26 and 10, quad 3, quad 4 record. Just for comparison, Kentucky's quad 3, quad 4 record was 20 and 8. I guess it's changed now since the Citadel moved over. I had these numbers earlier, but like, yeah, you're seeing just Kentucky's got the metrics, their numbers are better. So unless the committee just decides to eye test the you-know-what out of this, it's hard to, like, to me, it's just hard how it's shaking out. It's hard to see Kentucky not getting in from just where I'm sitting. And I know on the broadcast, that was the topic was on the broadcast was Kentucky they don't win this one, they're going to be out of the tournament. It was almost like all in or not, like it hit one or the other. This is going to determine game 54 is going to determine whether Kentucky is in the tournament or not.
Well,
I don't think
you might have written this. This Citadel game's damn near a quad 2 now. I mean,
it is quad 2. It just moved into quad 2.
They moved in. Okay, so
yeah, per Warren Nolan, they moved in there tonight.
That's somewhat of a big deal in a way because that was the series Kentucky was supposed to play. I forget who there's. It might have been Mercer, actually. I think it was Mercer, who ended up having a really good year. But Kentucky replaced them with the Citadel, who that ended up being a pretty good call as well. You know, we mentioned Miami, Ohio. That ended up being, even though it was just a one-game midweek, Miami, which I think lost today or last night in their tournament. But, you know, there's a chance that those home games against, you know, non-power teams, it could end up netting you 4 wins in the quad 2. So in this system, and I know a lot of people complain about the RPI. I know basketball went away from it years ago, but this is what you play with right now. And if people want to change it, that's what they need to do in the offseason. They need to get together and figure out something that's better. But you kind of play how it is. Like you play within the rules of the selection process, and Kentucky's been pretty good at that the last few years. And I tend to agree with Mark Etheridge, who, you know, basically made the case, like I mentioned earlier, with Florida and Kentucky from the past 2 years, that like these are the kinds of teams that the committee has really placed a high value on the high ranking wins. And for Kentucky, any of these bubble teams are not going to be able to stack up to. They have 5 top 10 wins, 5 of those 7. Quad 1 wins. You know, you have the 3 against Alabama, 1 against Auburn, and 1 against Florida, and then you get another one against Ole Miss in the top 15. Now, I know those other teams don't quite have the opportunity because they don't play within the SEC, but you know, that's the strength for UK is just the high end quality wins. And if they do get left out, then like I said, I'm not gonna raise a stink over it because it is what it is. Like they had so many opportunities, so many, to not be in this spot where 13 was the only SEC wins that they had. You know, they ended up not having a great record in one-run games, but, you know, losing at home to Missouri, losing on the road at South Carolina. You know, South Carolina team, too, that had an interim coach at that point. You know, they'd already fired their head coach. And no disrespect to Monty Lee. He'd been a head coach for a long time at Clemson, but, you know, it's still Kentucky could have avoided this. And that's not even talking about the LSU series. You know, obviously LSU didn't turn out to be very good. And then any of the other crazy games they had, the Friday night against Florida that got away from them, and LSU game, I mentioned that, Ole Miss, you know, back and forth game. So they could have avoided this, but even as it played out, all things considered, I think you still have to feel pretty good.
Yeah, I think Auburn, Alabama, and Florida all have chances to be national hosts. Kentucky's 5-4. Kentucky's 5. Like that's like the stat, you know, they pull sometimes. Well, they were 5-4 against the national host. And then I would throw in this: Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Tennessee are all going to be 2 seeds. They were 500 against that group, I believe, or right at 500. So like they've got a lot of wins over the field. So I think ultimately that's probably what's going to get them in. Like that's just like it's just hard, I think, to overlook that, specifically when you're comparing flawed teams like this at the end of the bracket.
Yeah. And full disclosure, I've not watched many of these other teams play. Like outside of, like, I've not watched any Texas State baseball this year. I couldn't tell you one player on their teams. But I think when you think about Kentucky, I know a lot of Kentucky fans will be like, well, they got no shot in a regional because the pitching's so bad. Could be completely true. They might go, like, I would not have high confidence either in them winning a regional. with that said, a lot of those markers you just mentioned and watching this team, like when you do have Jackson Jokin on the mound, they're good enough to be a tournament team. This is not like some, it's a flawed roster in the sense that the bullpen's, pretty bad. The pitching staff as a whole is bad. It's 6+ ERA on the season, but they can go and win a game in a regional. It's not like this is some
and they have
talent.
They have the offense to win a 12-11 game. They haven't really done that, but they've been in those.
Oh, the offense has given them a chance to win those. Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah, that's a good pivot point because I want to talk about, we'll get into this if they do make it and just kind of preview the region. But because we've seen some unique approaches, I think, with Mingione and just how he used Jokin really over the last series. And even kind of how they moved Jokin to Saturday and all of that. And I thought that really worked out well. Like, it won them the Tennessee series. I think it probably, damn near should have won them the Florida series. So they're going to get in a regional. They're going to be the 3.
Yeah.
They're going to play a 2. And then if you win, you're probably playing the 1. To me, I think your best chance to win the regional is have Jelkin throwing against the 1 and seeing if you can beat this 2 with Cleaver or Harris, whoever you want to throw. Do you think that is the path, or do you think are you in the book where you have to throw your best guy and then just win and then figure it out when you get to the next game?
Off the top of my head, historically, they have thrown their top guy, I think, every regional since Minjone's been here. I know they definitely threw Sean Jelly against Ohio in 2017, and I'm pretty sure they threw Pooser against Western Michigan, right?
Didn't Travis Smith throw the first game? The first Super Region? The second Super Region? I think he threw the first game, and then I'm trying to think who the staff ace was that year.
Which year?
Year before Pooser, 23.
Yeah, I mean, Travis moved into that Friday night role. They didn't really have really their best pitcher in 23 was Mason Moore.
Right, coming out the pen.
Okay. But to answer your question, because that's what matters, the pro case for Cleaver is he did it last year. It's not been as good this year, but it would not be a totally foreign concept for Ben to start the first game of a regional. And I think strategically, I tend to agree with you that you would be set up obviously much better if you were able to if you're able to win with whoever you choose to use the first game, and then if it did play out to where you're playing the top seed in the regional, to have Jelkin, because I'm not going to say they have no shot to beat a 1 seed if it's Cleaver or Nate Harris, but clearly from what we've seen this season, we don't need to dance around it. Jelkin by far gives them their best chance. I guess my question back to you would be, do you think Cleaver's kind of recouped enough value do you think he could give you 5 innings? Because my whole rebuttal to that would be, would be terrified trying to think this bullpen covering 5 innings in a regional game, trying to be in a spot against what I presume the other team will probably. That's the other thing. Will the other team throw their ace, or will they think the same thing? Try to save them for game 2. I mean, that's part of the strategy. I think it's hard to ask this Kentucky bullpen to cover a whole lot, but I see both sides, and I think Cleaver, having started that game last year, would help from the experience angle. And if he could get, if you feel like he could give you 5 innings of no more than 3 runs, then it might be worth pursuing that, honestly.
Yeah, I come at it from, how do we win this? The whole point is to try to win the regional. It's not just trying to win a game. It's trying to win the regional.
We'd probably both agree that getting to a game 4 scenario for Kentucky is just not going to turn out well. So to your point, if you're able to win the first 2, then conceivably I could see Nate Harris being good enough to beat a team in 1 game, and having enough bullpen left. Yeah,
I just think I look at it like this. Most regionals, for a lower seeded team to win it, they got to beat the number 1 seed 2 out of 3. That's how I look at it personally. You've got to win 2 out of 3 to win the regional. So I want Jackson Jelkin pitching one of those games for Kentucky. So I'm willing, and if we lose the game, throw Jelkin against the 4 and then just see what happens. But I'm of the belief that you just gotta. That's your best path, and that's what I would do personally. I would do that and then roll the dice. I mean, it's a dice roll, but you gotta do it eventually. If you don't, rolling the dice eventually later, to me, if you don't pitching.
This could be another just campaigning for the, everyone's all healthy, but I have heard that there's really no restrictions on Nate Harris at this point. he only threw, I think, 45-ish pitches, right, against Arkansas in that outing.
He looked good against Arkansas. Now he's been a different pitcher at KPP really throughout his career, but he looked good against Arkansas.
Yeah. He threw the Thursday night. That's right. Yeah. I was like, I know you pitched. It was a game that we were both there. But yeah, he was basically still on an innings count. But from what I have heard, if they get into a regional, he's full steam ahead. So we'll see if that actually pans out. So in your scenario, would you go with Harris or would you go with Cleaver in a game one?
I would go with Harris, or no, excuse me, Cleaver. Personally, I think he's your second best starter at right now. Not knowing, he pitched game one last year. I would throw Cleaver. That's what I would do. Throw the lefty. See if you can catch him by surprise a little bit. Yeah. That's how I would attack this. I don't want to get into matchups or anything because you just don't know, but
right.
But that's how I would attack this because I want Jelkin pitching against the team we probably have to beat in the regional. I don't want to use him and not be able to use him at all against the team you're going to have to beat to win it. And that's just how I look at it.
Case for Nate Harris, he also threw in an elimination game last year against Clemson. Yeah. Honestly, might have been his best start of the season last year. He was also very good against South Carolina last year. So he also has some postseason experience, whereas, Jelkin has none, right? I don't think Jelkin's thrown in a NCAA tournament. But, he's clearly just so much more talented, though, and has had such a better season that's not really weighing on my mind at all whenever I'm making that decision. But and we think he's healthy, right? I mean, he had the little weird thing the other day. He stayed in. He said quite a few more pitches after, but
said it was ankle. Just got to take him for his word. I mean, we'll find out, I guess, here next weekend. Interesting storyline. He could return to Nebraska. Nebraska's host. If you believe the committee is trying to find the juiciest matchups possible, that would be definitely one of them. Jackson Jelkin versus his old school, and he's from Omaha. Going back home, trying to knock off the Huskers.
Would you be fired up for a weekend in Lincoln?
what was it? Go get a Runza or whatever it is? Sure, why not? Go see the house that Kirk Ferentz owns right now. Yeah, why not?
Up there at, it would be cool to see that stadium, I guess, and just to visit another campus. But can't imagine that drive offers a lot. I'm personally hoping for Tallahassee. I don't know why. I've just never been there, and it's Florida, at least South Georgia, basically. But
South Georgia,
South Georgia, getting in there. But I mean, I think obviously for Kentucky, you're taking any of these. You're going to Southern California if they have to. If it means you're still playing postseason baseball. But I don't know. You got any final calls? Final prediction? Do you want to make one?
I think it's
hard on Thursday night.
Yeah. I think a lot of it's just going to be, how they kind of place the 2 seeds, because I think they're seeding it differently. I believe this year they changed last year where they'll number all the 2s, like 16 or 17 through 32. Excuse me. And I think they try to match those as best as possible. And where it gets interesting for a team like Kentucky when you're on the 3 line. Obviously, they're not going to want to match them up with any SEC teams if they don't have to. Mm-hmm. Well, there's 11 other SEC teams, so there's only going to be like 5 pods they can even be in, So you're looking at like Florida State, UCLA, Nebraska, Kansas, and North Carolina. I think those are the 5 that they're probably going to be in. Then what SEC teams end up in those is kind of how it's going to have to shake out. So it really, like, to me, it could go kind of in any direction. It's hard to even forecast it from Kentucky's standpoint. I think they could go anywhere. They could get UCLA, or they could get, West Virginia. If West Virginia got the 16 seed, last 16, they match them up with West Virginia all the time. So who knows? It could be that. So it could really go in any direction.
Yeah, as of now, if you use the bracketology from Baseball America, they have them at Nebraska, like you were mentioning. They would be playing Cincinnati out of the Big 12 there, and then D1 has them in Tallahassee playing Oklahoma State. So those teams, Oklahoma State is 23 in this, and then within Baseball America, Cincinnati's at 21. So you'll be playing the top 25 team, but, kind of what we just spent the whole episode talking about. Kentucky's beating teams that are, ranked higher, probably better quality, I guess it's safe to say, if you just want to use the seeding, because they've beaten several 1 seeds, and these teams coming in on the 2 line, I think you could feel good enough throwing off in a first game and seeing what happens. But some interesting baseball stories in the Midwest, huh? With Kansas, like they got the Jeff Passan profile the other day. Jeff taking his ESPN, which I know he lives out in Kansas City, or he used to. I guess he still does. So it was probably an easy story for him to write. And then Nebraska, the Big Ten, obviously the storylines with winning the basketball title with Michigan, winning 3 straight college football championships. But having UCLA in this league, is a big deal here. USC, UCLA, Oregon, all teams that are, I think, hosts or have been.
Yeah, they're all going to. I think Oregon's right, like close to the cut line, I believe, and so is USC. But UCLA definitely going to host. Yeah, the Pac-12 teams in Nebraska have kind of run through our own Big Ten baseball this year. That's kind of been the story there. And then, I'm interested to see, can we get Virginia like Mississippi State? Some of these coach matchups potentially, like in a region. I think that would be pretty fun. But it's all going to shake out. We'll find out on Monday. The wait is a little bit longer. We'll see if there are any bid sealers. That's really what Kentucky's watching. And then we'll see what happens and what's the reasoning from the committee, in or out for Kentucky. I think they're going to be one of the bigger talking points in this. When people talk about the selection show and who's in, who's out, Kentucky's going to be one of the major talking points this year. And we'll see how it all shakes out on Monday. And then we'll be back here on Pump It Up to preview the regional or wrap up the season. We don't know yet. We'll see how it shakes out. But me, Adam Luckett, that's Derek Terry. We'll see you next time.